Hello and welcome to the Real Film Podcast, episode 8. And we're going to be talking about our top 10 films of 2020. And it's been a good year, I think, all things considered. It's been a pretty crappy year outside of film, I will admit that. But I think despite all the pushbacks, I think 2020 has managed to provide us with some really, really great films. And as for us personally, we got to experience the BFI London Film Festival, which kind of opened our eyes to a lot of great films that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. But no, I think it's been a good year. What about you? Do you think it's been a good year?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a good year. I think because of all of the big films being pushed back, one of the biggest ones was obviously James Bond, No Time to Die. All that stuff being pushed back till next year, I think has really given the chance for indie films to shine a bit more. Like, you had to go out of your way to find more films to watch. You either didn't watch any new films or you had to go and find some independently made thing. As you say, the BFI Film Festival was really great for us, and there's lots of films on there that I could consider putting in our top 10. But outside of that, there's been plenty of really great films. I think, should we start? Have you got like a number one, what you think the best film of 2020 has been?
I don't know. I think because we've been watching a lot recently, like ones we think we've missed and stuff. I think there's a lot of films I've watched like quite recently that have just blew me away. But I think I may change my mind even by the end of the podcast. But I think how much I was surprised by it, how much I enjoyed it, and how much it works on a technical level and as an entertainment level, I think Possessor is still my favorite from when we watched it at the film festival. I think, I know we talk about recency bias, but I think it's almost the opposite of that. I think it's just stuck with me the longest at the moment for me to say that it's the one that I like the most, I think. So, it will change. I guarantee it. It will change, but that's my favorite, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I totally agree with Possessor there. That is actually what I was going to say is my number one sort of best film of 2020 as well. For pretty much the same reason. I watched it and I was absolutely blown away. Not that I had any bad expectations going into it, but I didn't know much about Brandon Cronenberg. I hadn't seen his first film before going to see this. And David Cronenberg I like him, but sometimes I think the body horror stuff and the grotesque stuff can be a bit too much for me. And I was a little bit worried about whether or not Brandon was going to have taken too much from his dad, or was he going to try and go the opposite way, and was it going to be just something wildly completely different and not work? But for me, Possessor worked. It's got, it has definitely got some inspiration from his father, but in a way that I think is really good. He carves a unique voice for him. There was two other films I was considering in this spot as well. One's more recent than the other, so it's a little bit more there's a bit more recency bias there. But the first one for me was Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which I think we were both very, very taken with. I'd heard a lot about this before I seen it, but I think it's a good year for progressive female cinema, because the other film I was going to put on there as well was St. Francis. But sticking with Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always for a bit, the way it sort of tackles with its issue of abortion is so well handled. It's so delicate. It's a beautiful character piece. I think there's some incredibly moving scenes in it. It's got a very slow pace, so you'd have to bear with it when you're watching it, but I do think it really, really pays off. An incredible piece of moving cinema. You thought the same, didn't you?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's up there. I mean, I think I went with Possessor just because, purely on the basis that I still haven't stopped thinking about it. And it's been a lot of months. But like you said about progressive films this year, I think it's just been, another one was The Assistant, which was one that I was toiling with, just because Assistant at first just feels like it's nothing's really happening. It is just almost like a day in the office of this girl. But and I know the Me Too movement's been around for a long time now, but it does start to feel sometimes that the conversation starts to drop a little bit. But this feels like I think I said it in the review, this feels like the movie to reignite it and keep that conversation going. It's absolutely fantastic. And, to channel a lot of different experiences through one character is a particularly difficult thing to do, and it's absolutely nailed. And I know that we've had a bit of confusion. Some films obviously had really good festival runs in 2019, but technically weren't really released till 2020. That's why we got a bit confused. But yeah, we as films that were released into the sort of mainstream in 2020, The Assistant is definitely one that is up there
Mm,
for me 100%.
mm. So before we go any further, it's probably just worth mentioning there's going to be a couple of omissions here because we haven't had a chance to see them. I think two that have really struck me that I would have loved to have seen beforehand, but they are actually getting their sort of theatrical mainstream releases are Saint Maud and Minari. Um, I think when it comes down to it, a lot of people will class them as 2021 films. Well, Minari they will. Saint Maud maybe not, because it did get a short theatrical run towards the end of 2020.
Yeah, one more as well is that I know that a lot of people have been talking about is Promising Young Woman as well.
Yes.
Again, it's really about when certain people have watched it. It's always funny around this time, isn't it? Anyway, because you got a lot of Oscar films that, and us being from the UK, we don't get to see a lot of these films until later on. But I know that Promising Young Woman is in the same sort of ballpark where people are absolutely raving about Carey Mulligan and just as of the film as a whole. So we haven't unfortunately seen that one. So that will
Yeah.
be an omission as well.
Well, why don't we hop back to the BFI Film Festival just for a little bit, because there's quite a lot of films on my provisional list of best from 2020 that were from the film festival. I think it was one of the only film festivals that went ahead that had quite a wide audience reach to it. So I think it was a good excuse for a lot of films to get seen for the first, or get a wide audience that it wouldn't normally have. So God, there's a few on here that I could jump for. I think as we haven't mentioned any documentaries yet, one film I'd really like to put in the top 10 is The Reason I Jump. Which really, really struck me. I didn't get to see the other documentary I think you're going to put on this list, but The Reason I Jump was absolutely fantastic in my eyes. It really sort of takes documentary to the next level and makes it an almost immersive experience, trying to understand and relate to the severity of the autism of the people we're following. I think it really, really struck a chord with me. I haven't forgotten about it since. I bought the book now and I've started reading it, the one that it's sort of taking cues from. But I don't know. How do you feel about putting that in our top 10?
Um, I'm okay with it. I mean, I'm still. I have 11, so but I think I know which one I'd cut out. But the Reason I Jump is on mine as well. I think it's another one of those that obviously we watched and it struck us, and it's still stuck with us. And I think the story it's telling, the representation it's giving is really important, but also it's technically made. It's just made really well as well. Like, it's the way that it uses the sound and stuff to kind of help us understand the world in which these people kind of live in. It's a really special documentary, and I think it's been a really great year for documentary, just because for me anyway, because I don't really watch them, and I think the film festival kind of forced me to watch them a little bit, and I'm really glad I did, especially this one. Yeah.
So the film that actually won I think it was the audience favorite or the best film from the BFI Film Festival, was Another Round, the Mads Mikkelsen led film. We've spoken about Another Round quite a few times, actually. I don't know if there's too much more we can add to it. Is that one you consider putting on the list? Because I think I would, but it depends. I mean, we could put it on there and then potentially remove it later if there's anything else which maybe deserves the spot a little bit more. But in terms of just pure enjoyment, that's one of the top, up there for me. It's a fantastic little film, that.
Yeah, it originally was on my list, and it is in the 11, but that's actually the one that I was considering knocking off, just
Yeah.
because the ones on the list for me are just absolutely fantastic. Like if you judge it by obviously the star ratings we often give films on Reel, they're all 5 stars, but we actually gave another round 4 star. So,
Mm,
and I think the problem we had with it, I know that you more so had it than like you more had the problem than I did. I think it's still a problem. So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
That's fine. Well,
for
I've written it on there. I have written it on there for now. We've got 6 films so far, so
6, do we?
we'll.
What do we have?
I've put so there's one on there that we haven't spoken about too much. I was going to come back to it in a minute, but so far we have Possessor, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, The Assistant, The Reason I Jump, Another Round, and then the one we haven't spoken too much about yet was Saint Francis. But
Okay,
we can.
yeah,
I'll come back to that in a minute. We'll finish the stuff from the BFI Film Festival first, and then because we've got loads of other stuff outside that to talk about as well.
yeah.
So I mentioned another round being really, really enjoyable. The one that was just pure enjoyment from start to finish, absolutely bonkers, was American Utopia, which I'm not even sure you could class as a proper film because it's just a concert. It's just a recorded concert. But I'm Spike Lee directed it. I don't know. It kind of feels like a good enough film for me. I don't really know what it is apart from being a concert film. I don't really fully understand it, but I had the best time watching it. It
Yeah.
was just I had the biggest smile on my face the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the festival, I think it's the film that we engage with the most, especially because we were watching it at the same time as well, weren't we? So
Yeah.
it was really great. It does not make my list.
Ooh.
I don't think it's not a question of I think just because it's a concert film. I just think that while it's enjoyable and it has that moment of Spike Lee's influence with the Black Lives Matter, which is really important. I just think for me, I've watched, especially in the past month or so, I've watched a lot of films that are better. I
Mm,
can't go past the fact that I just enjoyed it really, really thoroughly.
okay.
And there's films that I just think are a bit more complex and a bit more interesting.
That's right. No, I see. My provisional list is like 15 films, so I'm more than happy for that not to be on there.
Yeah.
However much I did enjoy it. Um, so I think there's 2 more on here from the BFI Film Festival that I've got. I know you've got another documentary on there, but one for me was Mangrove, which was the first in the series of small acts. Now I haven't actually seen Lovers Rock. Do
Yeah.
you think Lovers Rock is better than Mangrove?
I
I
think,
know they're different films, but
yeah, I can't say if one's better because I think it really depends on your taste. I think because they're very different. Because Mangrove obviously is a very it's a pretty structured film with like a really really big, deep emotional backdrop to it. Whereas Lovers Rock is very much more in the moment. I mean, they're both representations of the same thing, but and that's the whole point of the Small Axe series is to be a celebration of Black culture, and they both do that. Um, so for me, Mangrove is on my list, but
good,
Lovers
yeah.
Rock is also on my list. So
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll put them both on there for now. I definitely wanted Mangrove on there. I thought Mangrove was really, really special. Hit me in a really, really. Um, it hit me in a way that I was really not expecting it to. I know Steve McQueen is a fantastic director, and I knew quite a lot about the backdrop and the setting and stuff going into it. I don't know why it just resonated with me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and it was so emotional for me. There's so many sections in it where you just it'll go from this the police raiding the Mangrove restaurant and destroying everything, and then a few scenes later you'll have them dancing on the street and playing music and being so happy and just there's just so much life and character in those moments. Yeah, and I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. I'm glad we put it on there. I'll put both on there.
hmm. I
um
think I think I know I literally this is going to be a contradictory statement that you can't choose one over, but I think I just prefer the atmosphere of Lovers Rock a little bit
mm,
more. So, like for me, if Mangrove's on there, Lovers Rock should be there. Basically,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Okay,
my
I'll
thought.
put them on there. I'll put them both on there. I'll put them both on there. So the last one from the BFI Film Festival before I pass it over to you for a bit is Wolfwalkers, which was the animation by Cartoon Saloon, the Irish animation house. And what film that is, I know we spoke about that in our BFI LFF review as well. You didn't see Wolf Walkers until after, because I managed to catch it at the festival, but you only saw it on, was it Apple TV you watched it on?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it came on. Was it end of November, maybe? But
Something like
yeah, 100%. This is in my list. As soon as I watched it, it was 100% in my list. It's such a great film. I think I've seen all but one of the cartoon saloon films, but yeah, for me, it's the best one they've done. Uh, it's got such imagination, it's got such warmth to it, and it in my opinion, it's the best animation film of the year, 100%. So it deserves to be there. I got, like, when I watched it, I know that we spoke about it because obviously when you wrote the initial review, you gave it a star rating of 4,
that.
which, at the time I hadn't watched it, so I couldn't disagree or agree. But for me, it's just so outstanding. I think it's 5, like 100%. It has to be.
I Yeah, see, I have retroactively changed it to a 5 because after thinking about it more, I liked it and did mark it. I don't like it quite as much as you do, which is quite interesting because it's another animation that you don't like as quite as much as I do. I do think it's a really, really great film, but it wasn't one that immediately jumped to me that needed to be a 5-star and needed to be on this list. However, we'll whittle down the ones that we'll thin this list out in a bit anyway. I very highly doubt that will be removed from it anyway, however much we both like it.
Yeah.
So what else from because you saw a few more BFI Film Festival films than I did, was there any more that you considered putting on here?
I think it's just the one, and it was the second film or the first film of the festival, the documentary "The Painter and the Thief." I've actually, because I've been watching a lot of films recently from this year, "Painter and the Thief" is one it's kind of gone from my mind a little bit, but I still stand by it completely as one of the best of the festival, 100%. It's such a beautiful documentary. It's really touching. It's also really intriguing. Like, it's about a relationship between, obviously, a painter and the thief of her paintings. So I think it's a really beautiful friendship that they build together, but then also that lingering feeling of the missing paintings is still there. So it's working on different levels, and I think it's just such a beautifully made one. And there's one scene in particular, I know that, in the future, potentially we're going to do podcasts on scenes of 2020 and performances. So, look out for those articles and stuff and the podcast. But there is one scene in particular in Painting of the Thief, which is just incredibly moving. For me, it's the best documentary I've watched this year or last year. So for me, it 100% has to be it's in my 10 anyway. It's in my 10. That's all I know.
So the one for me that you haven't seen that I did really like, but it's not made onto the list, was First and Last Men, which was the Johan Johansson one. It's sort of like, how do you describe it? It's sort of like a fake documentary where you've got these humans 2 or 3 billion years in the future sending a message back to humans now, sort of talking about humanity, how it evolves, that they're doomed, but there's nothing you can do about it. And it's interesting. I really liked it. It's not a 5-star classic. I just think it's an interesting film that's worth checking out. So, one of the last films that came out in the year, so the 2 last films that I've got, which we could maybe talk about putting on the list, both came out in December of 2020. The first one was Mank, the sort of semi-biographical tale of Herman Mankiewicz as he wrote Citizen Kane. Now, I really liked Mank. I think it's really, really good. I don't know if it'll make the 10 for me. As you said before, there's just some really, really outstanding pieces of cinema that came out last year, and I don't know if this was quite outstanding enough to knock any of the others off the sort of podium. Are you in agreement with that, or?
It was in my 10, like when I first watched it, but it's not anymore. It's like, it's difficult to compare. It's a very unique film, Mank, actually, and I've always been a fan of films about Hollywood and the history of Hollywood and stuff. And even despite its sort of like semi-truth, I think it's really great, and the language used is fantastic. It's just like it's almost like that constant sort of 1930s wit and charm. It's just constantly being used, and it was a really great film. I think it's not really stuck with me that much. I think Finch is a great director, and I think the way in which he made it is very playful, and it's performed very well as well. I think Amanda Seyfried is fantastic in it. I know she isn't as she's not as big a part as someone like Gary Oldman, obviously, who is playing Mank, but her performance stuck with me quite a lot, actually. But no,
Mm.
I think I've watched movies in the past few weeks that like trump it, basically.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's one more before I'm going to go to the last film. I think it's just worth mentioning. It's not on either of our top tens, but Tenet, I think it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
It was the film that people thought was going to save cinema, or at least Chris Nolan thought it was going to save cinema in 2020, get people back into the cinema. Didn't quite do that. I think it's really, really interesting. I actually only watched it this week. I did really enjoy it. It's one of it's one of the films I've enjoyed more of Chris Nolan in recent years. I'm not like, I do really, really like Chris Nolan films, and I do really appreciate the ingenuity that goes into it, like how clever he must be to come up with this stuff. But I don't love him or his films. I think most of them have their issues in some way or another, and I don't think Tenet is, um, it still has its issues as well. But I really, really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. For me, I basically came out the other end thinking, wow, that's a pretty cool action film that has this really, really unique concept just weaved into it. It's not a character study or anything like that. There's not really much character development going on at all. But I thought the way that he creates the action pieces using sort of like bending time as he does, yes, I think is so fantastic. It's some of my favorite scenes that he's ever created, because there's so many sequences you'll see one way and then you see in a different perspective later on, and then that final one, the final sort of action scene right at the end, I think is genius. I think it's put together so well. Yeah, as a blockbuster action film, I think it's really great. But it's just, as we'll say with many of these films that we go, yeah, they're really great, but they didn't quite. There's better films that came out this year.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I think it's in terms of the production and the way in which it's sort of choreographed into, and I think like a lot of Nolan films, conceptually, it's great. I think characters do suffer, and I do think it's a bit rushed at the start to the point
Yeah.
where, like, you do catch up eventually, but you're struggling to get into like the part where the protagonist is then like he first meets the woman. I don't remember her
Mm.
name. Elizabeth Debicki's character. Well, I watched it in like July, so
Yeah, I watched it this week and I can't remember.
it's like that kind of the. I mean, it's barely even a connection, really, but they are meant to have some form of connection throughout the film, and you kind of get lost because you're trying to catch up with the details of the actual concept more so than anything. So I think
Yeah.
it does suffer a little bit, but like you said, the action sequences are absolutely phenomenal, and like just incredible.
And then the last film for me, and this is one I think you're gonna maybe have a little bit of contention with. The last film for me was Soul, which came out on Christmas last year. Now, we did a review of Soul, a podcast review of Soul. So if you want to hear our full opinions of that, you can go check that out. Also check the review out, Real Reviewing. But I absolutely loved it. It resonated with me in a way I did not expect at all. It's one of my favorite films of the year, and for me, it has to be in the 10. Um, there are other films I will knock off to put Soul on there, because Soul has to be in the 10 for me.
Mm,
I knew you were going to do that.
it's
I knew
not.
you were going
I
to do
mean,
that.
it's not in
But
my 10 at all. But
yeah,
and
yeah,
I think there's actually other films that I would put into the 10. If you're talking like, if we did like top 20, sure, top 15, definitely. But it just isn't in my top 10.
yeah.
I love the film, and it's okay if it's there. I'm not going to complain. It's still a great film, but no, it's I just maybe I just didn't connect to it as much. I thought
Yeah.
it was a pretty.
But we've
I
had,
thought, I
yeah,
thought it was a pretty comfortable 4-star, and it was really enjoyable. It was really great. It's got some great ideas, but I just think it kind of the the speed in which Inside Out allows you to kind of like get into the world and uh, just be so enamored with it. It kind of lost me when it got to the Great Before. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
well,
I
yeah,
just wasn't. I just wasn't as sold on that, to be honest. And
mm,
it's still a great film. If it's in the 10, I'm not going to complain as long as it doesn't knock out a film that I really, really love. So
yes. Well, is there any more films you want to add on? Because we have 11 at the moment. So,
there's one that I would definitely 100% have to put in there.
oh yeah,
It is Nomadland.
oh yes.
Just such a stunning movie for so many reasons. It's basically filmed in um, like a semi-documentary style where it's got a central character, which is Fern, which is Frances McDormand's character, who starts living as a nomad out of a van, and she goes to all these. She kind of just like drifts from one place to the other in order to work. But the other characters, they're all real people, and it gives the film just such a authentic feeling when she's talking to all these other nomads and stuff. But it never loses sight of the her story. You know, it is a fictional story. It's just set in such a reality that it makes all the emotion just that bit more like crushing, I guess. But no, as a character piece, as um, as an American experience that many people probably just don't know anything about, I think it's such a fantastic film. To be honest, like it's quite fresh in my mind, and that is one that potentially could overtake Possessor as the best of the year.
Oof,
It's such an
that's strong.
incredible film. The way it balances the fiction and the reality is so gorgeous. So
Yeah.
for me, it has to be there 100%.
Okay. Now I put that on the list. We need to whittle down the 12 to a 10 now. We need to remove two films. But just before we do, I just wanted to chuck in a couple more films that we haven't mentioned. These might not immediately jump to people's mind for best films of the year, but I definitely think people should check them out. The first one, which, if you want to say anything about, I think Striding into the Wind. That was another BFI Film Festival one. The more I've sat with it, the more I appreciate it. I remember when we first watched it, I said to you, I don't think I can write a review on this. I haven't had time to form my opinions on it properly. Like I say, it's not going to make the 10, but I just really, really like Striding into the Wind. And then the other one was a horror film I watched the other day called His House, which is the one about a couple who escape from South Sudan after some pretty horrific incidents. And they escape to the UK and they're given this sort of refugee house and they have to sort of make their way through it. And they find out they're basically being, I don't know if haunted is the right word, but they're being followed by this spirit for a very specific reason. And I won't say anything else other than that because the way it reveals information is one reason why this film is so genius. If we hadn't had so many really, really great films from earlier in the year, His House would be on there for me because the only reason it's not, I think, is the first half an hour or so is good but not great. And then as it starts to reveal what's actually happening, I think is absolutely genius. There's a section at the end where it sort of trying to describe it without spoiling anything. It sort of flows between dream sequences, reality, and flashback, just in the most effortless way, and it's just absolutely genius. It's so fantastic. It hits a lot of like really really important notes nowadays as well about the treatment of refugees in this country. Yeah, I just think that's worth mentioning. Is there anything you wanted to mention that you thought was really great from this year?
Oh, there's
Or
loads, but I'll say them, but I won't go into too much detail because we don't want to. I
yeah,
think we'll do a year in review and we'll give us a chance to talk about them in more detail. Aaron Sorkin's Trial of the Chicago 7 was really great. On the Rocks, Sofia Coppola's film, One Night in Miami, 200 Meters, The Five Bloods, Relic, First Cow, Sound of Metal. There's so many great films from this year. They just didn't quite make the cut for me. And as much
yes,
as we could spend hours talking about all these, um, I mean, we probably will in the future.
Yeah.
They're just some films, and one in particular that was on my list originally until it got taken over was Supernova, which was the
Mm,
one we saw at London Film Festival with Colin Firth and Stanley Tucci. Another just such a raw, beautiful film that's just absolutely soul crushing to watch. But and I've seen a couple of people, I think, sort of on Twitter, and it's kind of cropped back up on Twitter because I know that a few Americans have now started watching it because obviously it's a British film. Is that they've been pretty moved by it, and which is great because it is a very moving film. I think in the end it just didn't quite make the cut for me, but it's just a
yeah.
gorgeous film.
So, right, the 12 we've got so far. So we need to remove 2 films from this list. We'll go from the top. So we have Possessor, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, The Assistant, Saint Francis, The Reason I Jump, Another Round, Mangrove, Lover's Rock, Wolf Walkers, The Painter and the Thief, Soul, and Nomadland. So, got to remove a few from there. Now, the one that jumps out at me to potentially remove is Another Round.
Yeah, that's I was gonna ask
It's
you.
a really,
Yeah.
as we said before, it's a really, really great film. We weren't sure if it was going to make it anyway. I think cutting that out. Now, I know that you're going to want to remove Soul from this 10.
Yeah.
But I can't have Soul in there and not have Soul in there if Wolfwalkers is, because I think Soul is better than Wolfwalkers.
Okay.
I can't, in good conscience, have a film like that, like 2 animations like that. If I think one, I think anyway. But we've got to remove one. Is there any others that we haven't spoken about? Say Francis that much. I'm not saying it's worth removing, but have you got any thoughts you'd like to put on Saint Francis? I know we haven't put the review out yet because we both aren't quite sure how to articulate our opinions on it.
Yeah, I'm getting close. I've nearly written it, I think, but I might have to take a bit of time. But no, I think the more I thought about Saint Francis, the more it really should be there. I think the way in which it just, as a very as a drama comedy, if it didn't have anything else around it, it would feel just kind of run of the mill in my head. But I think what makes it so well presented is the fact that the statement it's making and the story it's telling, it's presented in such a normal way. That's what makes it great. If that makes sense. To me at first, the first instinct when you're watching it is just like, oh, it's a nice drama comedy, but it's the fact that it's normalizing everything into that drama comedy. It's not just making this big emphatic statement of being like a huge feminist movie. It's a feminist movie that's very subtle with how it does it, and it would rather just make a great film and weave that feminism into it and normalize it, and it's great, and it deserves to be there, to be honest. I mean, I know that you want Soul in there, and I guess Soul is going to be in there. I'm not going to complain, I guess, but it's going to kill me to get rid of another one over that.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. The problem is for me is that I haven't seen 4 of the films on here.
Yeah.
I haven't seen The Assistant, Lovers Rock, Painter and the Thief, and Nomadland. Now, I've heard great things about 3 of them. I haven't heard too much about The Assistant. Not saying that I've heard bad things about it. It just didn't seem to be that as many people saw it as Lovers Rock, Painter and the Thief, and Nomadland. I think Painter and the Thief I heard about more specifically because of the BFI Film Festival. I think if we hadn't been a part of that, I wouldn't have heard anything about that. But it's a hard one. It's a hard one because, as I say, I think Soul is better than a few films on there. But there's obviously there's only 6 films on there that I've actually seen on this list of 11.
Yeah,
7 films on there. Sorry.
Well, for me, Soul is the worst one on there. So you say oof, but you're the one who wants it on there. I've already said that I don't want it on there, so
yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm okay with it being on there, though. I'm not, I'm making it sound like I don't actually like the film. I love the film. I think it's great. But the ones that jump out to take off, if it's not,
that's why the ones that jump out.
None of them really jump out. But
No.
if I had to pick, it'd probably either be Painter and the Thief and Reason I Jump.
I was thinking The Reason I Jump, but I do think it's really, really great. I don't know if it's better than Soul though. That's my problem. There's a lot of deliberation going on in my head now.
Well, I don't know because, like, obviously there is 4 films that you haven't seen, and I feel, or how
Yeah.
I think it's 4. And now you're just kind of gonna have to go on my word.
Yeah, this is the
So
problem. Yeah,
I don't want you to be like watch them and then be like, well, that's just, you're a fucking idiot.
I don't think I would. I don't think any of these films would be on this list unless we have a similar enough taste in film. Like, we do obviously differ from time to time, but it's usually we think this film is a 4 instead of a 5 than
Yeah.
anything else. You know what I mean?
It's not like we have films where you love them and I hate them. It's never,
Yeah.
it just never occurs really.
No.
I'm gonna go with Painter and the Thief or Reason I Jump. I think.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think if I was comparing the two, the one that stayed with me more from the festival was Painter and the Thief.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But the Reason I Jump, I would say, is trying to achieve something, and which it does achieve. It was pretty special. It's just how it's trying to use like its production to help us understand the world of these people. I think it's really unique in that way. But The Painter and the Thief is just a really great story as well, I think.
It is. So obviously I haven't seen Painter and the Thief. Is the actual filmmaking still really, really great though?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
one of the reasons why The Reason I Jump is so good is not we talk about it being immersive and using the sound and everything, but that's because the talent behind it, the filmmaking behind it, is that good. I think the way that it's actually made, it's not just an interesting story. The way it's made is really, really well too. Is The Painter and the Thief that good as well?
The thing is, I think Painter and the Thief doesn't have such a demanding technical like presence. Like it's telling a story, a very personal story between two people, and it's shot beautifully. But as a documentary, it's much more like, lingering on the person or just finding these big bold shots of art and stuff, and it's really, really beautiful. And it has no reason to do what The Reason I Jump does. They're very unique in their own way, so that's my only problem with it. I just think that The Reason I Jump, you do pick out the way in which it's made, just because it's a really impressive feat of what it's achieved. I'm okay with either of them coming off the list.
Okay. Well, my only thing is obviously I don't. If you think Painter and the Thief should be on the list, I can't exactly argue with that at all. I haven't seen it, although I think I might have talked myself into thinking Reason I Jump is better than Soul. But
okay, let's get rid of Soul then.
Well, see, this is the problem because I think Soul is better than Wolfwalkers.
No, I don't think
you
it is
don't
at
think
all.
that.
No. Okay, decision time. We need to get rid of one, and it kind of seems like it's come down to Painter and the Thief and Reason I Jump. And after a bit of deliberation, I think we've decided that Painter and the Thief should go, and The Reason I Jump should stay. Purely on the fact that this is a team effort. This is this is two people making a list, and it doesn't really help if one of the films, like Reason I Jump, we both love. Painter and the Thief, I love. So I think I think that's why. So now we have our 10. So I'll just reel them off for you. Hey, see, reel
them off.
I'll reel them off for you. So we have Possessor, Brandon Cronenberg's great film. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, The Assistant, St. Francis, The Reason I Jump, Mangrove, Lovers Rock, Wolfwalkers, Soul, and Nomadland. It's a good list.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah,
not bad.
Yeah, it's all right.
Not bad. Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad list. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just before we finish the podcast, fair, I've been quite impressed actually. Like when we've been going through films, like you always kind of judge a film a little bit by how many 5 stars you give it, how many 5 stars you give in that year. And 2020, surprisingly, has been quite a few. What?
You said film instead of year. You said how many. You said how no. You said something that didn't make sense. You said you judge a film by how many 5 stars you give it.
Oh, okay, right. I'm change that.
So it was just a little bit confusing. Yeah. I didn't know what you were trying to.
I think it's been quite surprising. I think because we've watched so many films recently, we've kind of really discovered how good 2020 is. And I usually judge a year in film by how many 5-star films there are in that year, basically. And 2020, there's been quite a few, a surprising amount, considering all the setbacks that cinemas had. But I hope you all agree with our lists. I know some of you won't agree with Soul. That's okay. But yeah, let us know if there's any we missed off, any that we really, really shouldn't have put in there.
I'm gonna reach down your head button.
But thank you for listening. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, anywhere really. Go for it. Find us. You can reach us on Twitter. Me at CospJord.
And me at Philson Wilson.
Yeah, if you want to give him any hate about Soul, that's fine. No, but thank you for listening, and look out for our real article about the list. Okay, thank you.